Yeah, your grace in heaven reaches, and heaven reaches, and out to us. And your grace is enough for me. God, I sing. God, I sing. Your grace is enough, and I'm covered in your love. And your grace is enough for me. It's enough for me. Enough for me. It's enough for me. Thank you, God. Jesus. It's enough for me. Thank you, God. We're just going to continue on singing about the faithfulness of God. Sing with me again. Great is your faithfulness. Great is your faithfulness. Great is your faithfulness. You never change. You never change. You never fail, oh God. Sing with me. True are your promises. True are your promises. Oh, true are your promises. You never change. You never fail, oh God. Sing with me. So we raise up holy hands to praise the Holy One, and who was and is to come. Yeah, we raise up holy hands to praise the Holy One, and who was and is to come. Sing with me. Wide is your love. Here we go. Wide is your love and grace. Ooh, wide is your love and grace. You never change. You never fail, oh God. Sing with me again. Wide is your love. Wide is your love and grace. Ooh, wide is your love and grace. You never change. You never fail, oh God. So we raise. Here we go. And then we raise up holy hands and to praise the Holy One, and who was and is to come. Yeah, we raise, and we raise up holy hands to praise the Holy One, and who was and is to come. Sing with me. You were. Here we go. You were. You are. You will always be. Sing it again. You were. You were. You are. You will always be. You were. You were. You are. You will always be. One more time. You were. again. So we raise. Here we go. So we raise up holy hands to praise the Holy One, and who was and is to come. Let me hear you, church. Yeah, we raise up holy hands to praise the Holy One, and who was and is to come. Let's sing that last line. Who was and is, and who was and is to come. One more time. Who was and who was and is to come. Thank you, Lord Jesus. Thank you, Lord God. Thank you, God. He was and is to come. Sing with me. Come out of sadness. Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, let rescue begin. Come find your mercy, or sinner come kneel. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. 'Cause earth has no sorrow heaven can heal. Let's sing it again. Come out of sadness. Here we go. Come out of sadness from wherever you've been. Come broken-hearted, the rescue begin. And come find your mercy, or sinner come kneel. 'Cause earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. 'Cause earth has no sorrow that heaven can heal. Sing with me. So lay down your burdens, and lay down your shame, and all who are broken, lift up your face. Wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hurt, lay down your heart. Come as you are. There's hope. There's hope for the hopeless and all those who stray. And sit at the table, come taste the grace. And there's rest for the weary, and rest that endures. And earth has no sorrow that heaven can cure. Sing with me. Lay down your burdens, lay down your shame, and all who are broken, lift up your face. Oh, wanderer, come home. You're not too far. So lay down your hood, lay down your heart, come as you are, come as you are. Sing with me. Fall in his arms, fall in his arms. Come as you are. Let's sing it again. Come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in his arms. Come as you are. joy for the morning. There's joy for the morning. Oh, sinner, be still. Earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. 'Cause earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. So lay down your burdens, lay down your shame. Know who are broken, lift up your face. Wanderer, come home, 'cause you're not too far. So lay down your heart, lay down your heart, and come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in his arms, fall in his arms. Come as you are. Come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in his arms. Come as you are. Let's sing it quietly. Come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in his arms. Come as you are. Let's sing it again. Come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in his arms. Come as you are. So beautiful. Sing one more time. Come as you are. Come as you are. Fall in his arms. Come as you are. Thank you, God. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord God. When I sing this song, it's amazing. We sing that we can come as we are. And yet so many times deep down inside, we somehow feel we have to come and clean up ourselves to come to Christ. I mean, if you're like me, you've had that feeling inside where you're like, well, I'll eventually deepen my relationship with God. Eventually, when I get more into his word, eventually I'll come to church. Eventually, I'll do things. And what's not holding back is our schedule. Yes, we're all busy. What's holding us back sometimes is the shame that we put on ourselves because somehow we feel deep down inside we're not worthy. Somehow we feel like we got to take care of that stuff. I can't go deeper because I got all this stuff. Jesus was speaking to the Pharisees in his day, and he gave a story saying, you have this teacher of the law who talks about everything he does, how clean he is, how wonderful he is, how he tithes, how he's got it all together. And yet he says, I thank God I'm not like the other guy there. The guy who's had shame from being a tax collector, who's robbed people, who's been unjust. And it said the tax collector didn't even look up to heaven. But he stood there asking God for mercy, knowing he was a sinner. Church, Jesus is not looking for people that are so healthy and perfect, and everyone whose little Facebook pictures look so wonderful. He's looking at you to come as you are. He did not save us because of the good work you can do and because of how good you can be. He saved you because of how amazing he is and what he can do for us. Father, today I just pray that we would come, we would learn what this means. Come as
as you are, with sorrow, with brokenness, with hurting, because earth has no sorrow that Jesus cannot heal. Thank you for us being able to worship you. In Jesus' name, amen. Sorry I'm late. I've had a day.
Say, Wiz, can you help me out? Thanks, bro.
Is everything all right?
My romantic comedy is a romantic tragedy.
Michelle, I can't live without you.
Man, why do we always come to the movies?
You can learn a lot from a movie.
Good morning, I'm back. Watching that intro video reminds me we forgot the popcorn this morning. We got the theater, we got all the people, but we forgot the popcorn that's sitting there waiting. But we do have weapons of mass destruction in the form of audio torture. Well, my name's Jimmy. I'm one of the pastors here at Forward Point, and we're going to continue on in our At the Movie series. When I was going to college, this was back in 2001, I graduated from Faith Heritage, and I went to Elam Bible Institute. And before going to Elam, a bunch of my friends and I, we got on the road about a week ahead of time to go and scout out the area for jobs, right? We wanted to make sure we got in early, our applications before the rush came, and one of the things I always wanted to do was be a server. Has anybody here ever been a server in a restaurant before? A couple people, right? It's a pretty popular way for young people to make some money. I can think about a handful of places that my family has frequented in our life. One of them being Ponderosa. We love Ponderosa. Growing up, there's not too many of them around, if any, anymore. And remember this one male waiter who my family just kind of fell in love with for the way he treated us. And the server can kind of make or break your experience there with a restaurant, right? It can even be the reason for which maybe you go back numerous times. And for us, this guy, I forget his name, but he was the reason, besides, buffet food, that we would go back to Ponderosa, right? So I've always been great with people. I've loved sales. So as a high school kid, I always thought, man, I would love to be a server. I think I would be great at it. I think I would make a lot of money at it because I'm a people person. But in high school, I kind of got stuck working some jobs with some friends of mine, and this crazy Christian bookstore down the street was one of them. But here I am in Rochester, scoping out all these places to try to become a server for when I get there and start school. Now, I didn't really have any serving experience, but I didn't think that would be a big deal, right? I figured you guys take a gamble on me, and it's going to be the best thing that ever happened to your business because I'm that great of a people person. People are going to be coming back constantly to this restaurant, whichever one hires me first, because I'm amazing, right? Now, these are the days before cell phones. So when you're filling out the application and you need a number to put on there for them to call, normally back then in 2001, you would put your home phone number that they would call at. But I wasn't going to be at home. I was going to be at Elam, and they didn't really have phones in our rooms, but there was a dorm phone. I don't know if you guys went to college or what it was like for you, but for us, each floor had its own phone in the hallway, right, that the entire floor was to use. So your only kind of form of connection for hopefully these people connecting with you is this one phone that you have to get at just the right time that they're going to call you at, or you're going to pray that someone else on your floor is going to answer the phone and take down all the notes and the proper information so that you can call them back, right? Again, a floor full of freshman males are going to be responsible enough to get the information that you need to call them back. Well, suffice it to say, I never got any kind of call back to serve at any of these restaurants. Now, I don't know if it was because I missed a phone call or I wasn't relayed the information needed to connect, but I never got a job working at a restaurant. To this day, I still have never worked at a restaurant as a server. I feel like I have to add it to my bucket list as I'm getting older here as one of those things that I want to do before I die. I've done funerals now. I've worked at a funeral home, and I've done all sorts of weird jobs with Steven, and I cannot cross off yet working as a server. But I remember as a young college student, kind of whenever I was at the dorm, just waiting patiently in my dorm room with the door open so I could hear the phone if it rang, just for the chance that I didn't miss one of these phone calls, right? And as the weeks went on and never heard anything and I never got the opportunity to be a server, it kind of felt like this major rejection. I don't know if you've ever worked yourself up for something that you're going to be great at, that it's going to be awesome, it's going to be life-changing, it's just what you need, or, the rest of your life is going to be complete now because you have this, and then it just kind of drifts away and fades into eternity with no hope of ever coming back. And that's the position I kind of find myself in, is almost rejected, right? Like, you look at this piece of paper and it doesn't fully represent who I am. I could be a great server, right? Or maybe, they see me pen in the application and they're looking for maybe somebody a little bit more tall, dark, and handsome, and I'm a little bit more on the short, plump, and, not hard on the eyes, I guess, but not necessarily Fabio material, right? And maybe they kind of put that application in the do not call pile instead of the interested pile. And it hurt. It hurt that I didn't at least get a chance, that somebody wouldn't gamble on me, wouldn't take the opportunity to just reach out and let's have a conversation, an interview, and then make a decision. But just based on this piece of paper, based on what you saw, I got nothing. All right, well, here we are in the middle of this At the Movie series, and what we're doing is we kind of came around this idea that if a picture paints 1,000 words, then a movie, probably how many even infinite more words come across whenever we watch these movies. And here we are in the theater, and you can learn things from a theater. So we've been taking from movies. We're taking these movies and we're seeing, what God might be saying to us through some of these different movies. The first week, we started off with the movie Black Panther, and we looked at this idea how, right, we were never meant to have a king. But somewhere along the line, the people of Israel said, you know what, God, we want a king over us to take your place, this relationship between you and me where you talk to us and we do what you tell us. It's cool and it's all right, but everyone else around has a king, and we want to be like everyone else around. And thus set this plan into motion where God says, all sorts of bad things are going to happen as a result of their desire to be like everyone else around him. But if that's what they want, then that's what I'm going to give them. And ever since, we've been in this constant serfdom of fighting for our kings instead of fighting and living for God. And then the next week, Stephen took the movie The Darkest Hour. It portrays, the turmoil that Europe went through and how Winston Churchill kind of became this leader that was able to refuse to submit to Hitler in talks of peace. And this idea of persevering even in your darkest hour. And last week we had David with us, and David kind of zeroed in on a specific battle time there during that same story in Dunkirk, right, where these men are stranded on this beachhead, hundreds of thousands of them, and they didn't think there was a way that they were going to be able to get them out. But the common folk came together. They all got their boats, anything that could carry a person, and they rescued most of every single soldier that was there on that beachhead. And he talked about this idea of there's a battle for our identity. Today, we get to talk about this, movie that's near and dear to my heart. It's The Greatest Showman, right? Now, you have to understand, how many people here have seen this movie, The Greatest Showman? Hopefully, everyone here. So, Mike Carter, you haven't seen it yet? Mimi, you haven't seen it? Oh, man. Movie night at my house tonight. You guys come over, BYOP, bring your own popcorn, all right? We're going to watch a movie. Now, you have to understand, I am not a big fan of musicals, okay? Anybody else relate to me, not a big fan of musicals, right? You go to a musical or a play, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, another song. Didn't we just sing a song, and now we're singing again, right? I can't stand just the song after song after song. But for some reason, maybe it's because my wife comes from a long line of circus family, right? So I've been to the circus more times than you can count since we've been dating. The movie has a very special place in the Doyle family house, right? So that kind of gave it some leeway to be able to watch. But I remember just sitting down. We went and saw it with the Skinners at the theater. And from beginning to end, I was just captivated, songs and all, by this movie, right? This movie is kind of a loose translation of the life of P.T. Barnum, played by Hugh Jackman there on the screen, who kind of, has this desire for business and for a lot of times, swindling people so that he can become successful. And it's this story of rags to triumph, to his life kind of falls apart, and then it all being restored at the end, as most movies come to at some point in it, right? Now, I wouldn't say that this is based on a true story. While the names, are factual, he was a real person. It didn't quite happen like it did in the movie, and there's some people that they made up for the movie. So, we won't call it a true story, but it's loosely based on some historical figures. But it's this awesome story. And one of the things that Hugh Jackman is playing P.T. Barnum does is, as he's trying to come up with these different ways to make money, right, to be successful, to rise above the humble beginnings that his family was at, he begins to cheat his way into a bank loan. So he buys this wax museum, as it were, right? As he puts all these resources into this wax museum, he opens it up to absolutely zero fanfare. Nobody's interested. And his daughters kind of begin to challenge him and say, you need some excitement, you need some magic, some wonder. And he begins to think about this idea of putting people who, right, the world seems as kind of different, as crazy, as those who are shunned, and putting them on stage for people to see and look at. And he becomes very successful by starting what he calls a circus, right? The local critic doesn't like what he's doing, and he calls his bands of freaks a circus, and he loves the name, so that's where the term circus came from. And he falls in love with the money that he's making as a result of these oddities and the attention that they draw, both negative and positive. There's people protesting that these people are existing and to be allowed on stage. There's people who love the show that he's putting on. And it's almost like all you see in his eyes is dollar signs. At first, it was a genuine opportunity for these people, but as the success becomes greater and greater, he starts to drift away from the people that he fell in love with and becomes focused on the next big thing. And there's a scene where he has brought in Jenny Lynn, who's this famous singer from across the pond, and it appeals to the upper class, right? He's finally able to put on some kind of show that the upper class are going to want to come to, and he's not having to rely on the lower class to come to his oddities. But the people of his show absolutely love her singing, and there's a party, and they want to come and meet her and be a part of it, and he rejects the very people who helped him get where he's at. And there's this powerful song that ensues, and here's me, the anti-musical guy who's about to show you a musical number from a movie. So that's the scene I encourage you to check out here as we watch. Woo! I want to go home and watch the movie now. Church dismissed. Right, but there's this, when I watched the movie, begin to try to find myself in it, right? And this is one of those scenes where it's easy to find yourself as one of these oddities in the face of rejection again, right? Maybe it was a phone call that you never received for an interview to be a server. Maybe it was some kind of relationship that dwindled as the person who sat across from you just stopped looking at you the same way. Right, whatever it is for you that begins to kind of make you relate to these oddities and feel rejected again. And here's another moment, right? These words, I'm not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, hide away. Right, how often do you find yourself in that place needing to just, man, I need to hide away, hide away. All I am is broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say. Run away. No one will love you as you are, but I won't let them break me down to dust. When the sharpest words want to cut me down. In the second verse, they say, another round of bullets hits my skin. Right, this kind of idea of constantly living in this state of mind of being attacked, of not being acceptable just the way that you are, or even feeling confident yourself in who you are. Maybe it was words that were spoken over you years ago or just minutes ago. There's now this doubt in the way that you see yourself and who you are. This is the state that we find ourselves in, right? Maybe put in, right? This man, we got an opportunity, and now the very hand that reached out to us is turned away from us, leaving us wondering who we are inside. Man, it hits me in the gut, right? I think about as a young person growing up, right after kind of the starstruck questions people always ask when you're a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? There's the fireman, and there's the policeman, and there's all those things that everybody wants to be. Well, for me, the first thing that I truly felt to do and that I was going to work hard at was to play, right? Like legit, I wanted to be in the NBA. The physics did not matter to me. It didn't matter that I was closer to the ground than to the rim. Okay, this is what I wanted to do, and this is what I was going to work hard at. This is who I was going to become. So I spend countless hours at the YMCA every day after school just practicing, working on free throws, working on my layups, right, doing all these things. I realized as people began to pick teams at street ball, I wasn't usually the first one picked, because when people look at me, I don't look like your typical basketball player, right? I look more like your sumo wrestler in training, right? And that's kind of my disposition, right? But so I figured, I'm going to work really hard. So they had these things back in the day. They were called strength shoes, right? There are these weird shoes. I don't know if you've ever seen them that you can wear. There's a big platform at the beginning, at the front, and basically what it does is it puts all your weight on the balls of your feet, right? So it's like instead of just when you're walking like normal, your weight is spread out over your foot. 100% of your weight is on the ball of your foot, thus working the calf muscle more so. I don't know, maybe snake juice oil or something, but I was like, I'm going to have the biggest calf muscles, and I'm going to be able to dunk the ball and show all these people what to do, right? Right? Sometimes that's what we do, is we work on some kind of gimmick or something that we can do to change about ourselves, to prove people wrong. And that's what I did, and I got pretty quick. After a while, people started choosing me higher up on in the order when it came to picking teams. And I was deceptively quick, right? You look at me, and again, you don't think that I can move much faster than sundial speed. But in real life, playing basketball, I was pretty quick. Maybe it was the shoes, I don't know. Maybe it was just people didn't have enough credit in me, and I was able to get by them as a result. But I was pretty quick and able to get around people. And again, it just fed this, I'm going to do it. I'm going to prove everybody wrong. I'm going to be the next Spud Webb, who can dunk at 5'0", right? And going through high school. And I remember my senior year, I didn't really get along with the varsity coach. But, we all kind of want somebody to want to we want them to fight for us, right? We want them to, even if we're feeling one way, to kind of come in and say, that's not the truth. That's not who you are. I believe in you. So I was hoping my coach would do that in me. I was going to tell him, you know what, I can't really play basketball this year. I was in a car accident. I have to pay for some damages done. And I started kind of telling these excuses with the hopes that maybe he would kind of try to fight for me. Right? Try to say, man, Jimmy, I really would love for you to play. I believe in you, the style that you have. I think it could bring a lot to the team. Just some kind of, fishing for some kind of reason to stay and work hard for this coach. But the truth was, he didn't really like the way that I played because I was kind of, unorthodox in my style. And he was like, well, Jimmy, I'm sorry to hear that. We're going to miss you. And then he just walked away. All right, and here's the thing that I probably treasure and value more than anything else in the world at the time is my future in the sport of basketball. And now this guy who has this power to speak into me obviously doesn't see the same things that I hoped for and dreamed for, and then the world crumbles a little bit more. I feel, again, the sharpest words want to cut me down. Another round of bullets fired away. One of these oddities. Right, when Jesus was here on earth, he had kind of this experience with one of the different kind of oddities of his time. If you have your Bible, you can pull it out, or if you're following along in the YouVersion app, you'll see it on there. It's in Matthew. And what's going on here is Jesus had just got done kind of preaching a humdinger, and we'll pick it up here, and it says, Jesus, in verse 1, came down the mountain with the cheers of the crowd still ringing in his ears. Then a leper appeared and went to his knees before Jesus, praying, Master, if you want to, you can heal my body. Now, what we have to understand here is lepers of this day are the oddities of the Greatest Showman, or the people who were shunned, right? They were kind of forced to live in their own communities, isolated, because this disease, what it began to do was literally cause your body to decompose and parts would die, and you wouldn't feel pain. So you could, have your hand in the fire and you wouldn't feel it, and it literally would just begin to melt and burn off, and you would have all these deformities because your nerves were dead and you couldn't feel the different things that would cause you to react to harmful things, right? And in those days, there wasn't a lot of medicine, doctors. They thought it was a contagious disease, so they would do whatever they could to isolate people with this disease, keep them penned away in their own little communities on the outside of town. The modern day refugees or whoever in your world you kind of put in the outskirts or consider the oddities. And here's this person dealing with this disease, and he says, Master. Right? He takes this chance, this kind of leap of faith by breaking the norm, by allowing himself to break free from the confines of the leper colony. And he finds Jesus and he says on his knees, Master, if you want to, you can heal my body. And here's where Jesus kind of sets the picture for us and how that we respond both as a leopard and to lepers in our day. Jesus reached out and touched him. Right? Again, this is probably one of the most radical things that Jesus in his entire life here on earth could have done, was gone to somebody who was literally known as untouchable. And Jesus touches him. He reached out and touched him. This leper probably realizing he's breaking all sorts of normalities by even being there. He's keeping his distance, and Jesus reaches out and touched him, and he says, I want to be clean. Then and there, all signs of the leprosy were gone. Right? It's easy to kind of focus our attention on, bam, this miracle happens, right? This miracle of the leprosy gone. But in my heart, I feel like it's so easy for us to skip over the true miracle that happened first was Jesus reached out and touched him. Right? Something inside of him was healed long before his body began to heal. All of a sudden, this oddity, this outcast, the person who had heard the cutting words and the other round of bullets, that somebody would reach out and touch him, began to heal the hurts and the broken and the pain in his life. Right, for him, the leprosy being gone was secondary to a spirit that was being restored by somebody who would dare to touch him in the state that he was in. And then Jesus said, don't talk about this all over town. Right, it's almost like Jesus is saying, we're going to keep this on the DL. All right, I don't want anybody to know I'm touching lepers here. This gets out and it's going to be bad for me, right? But he says, just quietly present your healed body to the priests along with the appropriate expressions of thanks to God. And here's the clincher. He says, your cleansed and grateful life, not your words, will bear witness to what I have done. Right, the life that you're going to live, just you walking around town and people are like, oh, who's the new guy in town? Well, that was Frank, who used to be missing 3 fingers and his nose was falling off. Right, that's going to, what happened to him? What in the world is going on here? Just your life and your gratefulness will speak far more than just your words. You see, so often us as people who become Christians, we rely on our words to convert people. Right, we rely on our words to the Bible says that this is a sin. And somehow our words are going to convince people that what they're doing or not doing is justification that they have to change now. Right? Sometimes we fall back on our words or even other people's words that were written in the Bible, words that are true unconditionally. But Jesus says, don't rely on your words. He says, your life, your cleansed and grateful life will bear witness to what I have done. And in my heart, I feel we are probably the largest group of lepers, right? Maybe not externally, but internally dealing with parts of our spirit and our soul, our hearts and our minds that have become numb, that are breaking, that are falling apart, needing someone to come and to reach out and to touch us. Talk is cheap. We can rely on our words. But something happens when you see somebody who's been changed their life, right? The way that they live. We've all seen people who, man, there's something special about them and the way that they live. I read a book by Donald Miller called Blue Like Jazz, and in the beginning, his foreword, he says this. He says, I've always hated jazz music because it never resolved, right? His personality was such that he needed the music to resolve and kind of come to an end, but jazz music kind of just flows on, right? And he says, I've always hated jazz music because there's no resolve until I found myself in the heartland of jazz music, and there was a man playing on the corner who loved jazz music. And there was something about the way that he played, and he lost himself, and he said, since that day, I now love jazz music because the way that musician played awoken something in my heart. It's similar to my wife and I went to this fundraiser down in Orlando when we were living down there for an organization called To Write Love Under Arms. To Write Love Under Arms is this organization that lives to help people who are dealing with depression and self-mutilation, like cutting, and they become this voice of saying, there's more to your story than the pain that you're feeling or these things that you're doing to yourself. And in our youth group there in Florida, we had a lot of students who were dealing with this, so they were a great resource for us. So we went to this concert that they were having at the House of Blues there in Orlando, and these 3 musicians were playing that I had never heard of before. All right, I wasn't going for them. I had no idea that I would be enamored by their music. But there was 3 individual solo artists who were part of a band, but they were just playing by themselves up on this big, huge stage in front of hundreds and hundreds of people. Just them and their guitars, and the way that they sang with such emotion and passion. That night, I bought a shirt and a CD from each one of them, and they're all on my regular playlist. Because when I watched them and I saw the way that they were set free in their playing, it broke something within me. To see such freedom, to see such love for an art, it was beautiful. And it did something inside of me. One of my favorite scenes from this movie actually isn't even in the movie. There's a video in the extras, and you can see it on YouTube, where they're singing this song before the movie's even been green-lighted for production. And they're kind of doing a walkthrough of the entire movie to the money holders to see if they'll back the movie. And there's this song that they're playing, and something happens as they're just singing the song to each other, where you get the same kind of feel, the same kind of emotion as the words become real to them and they're singing. I remember I saw it for the first time, and I was like, man, this is what church should be like. This is what it should feel like on a Sunday morning, for people to be released and to be freed to the different purposes that they feel inside of them. Right? And we should be able to look down to our left and to our right and to see people who are liberated in their purpose for Jesus. So what I'd like to do is just show you that scene. There was no cameras for movie production in the room, and there's no live audience that they were performing for. They were singing freedom into themselves and into each other. And it starts off very docile, right? But it was when she kind of broke the barrier and got out from behind her stand, she allowed herself in this kind of vulnerable space to begin to sing in a way that brought freedom for other people to break out of their space. Right? We think about holding hands. Up high, singing has to only be done to a Matt Redman song or to a Chris Tomlin song, right? But this act of raising our hands, it's an expression of what God is doing inside of us, right? And the same God who created you and me and our humanity created them, right? So the same thing comes alive as they begin to express this freedom, is the same thing that should come alive in us as we sing these songs to God. They may or may not publicly acknowledge a relationship with Jesus, but they are expressing the very thing that all of humanity was created for. And it could even say they are tapping into something that sometimes us as followers of Jesus and in the church never ever get a chance to experience. Right? Because they were brave enough to step from behind the podium, to allow themselves as an oddity, as someone who's broken, been bruised, full of shame, to allow that to bring healing to the people around them. And you find this, right? One person stands and another person stands, and the guy on the piano is doing all sorts of weird facial expressions, right? Because he's just in the moment, loving it. This is me. Right? For us to be people who live in that moment, we have to first recognize who we are as oddities, right? We have to assume our identity is broken, is shameful. But what trumps those things that we do is our identity is, just like the song says, we are glorious. Right? God created us glorious in his own image. So we have to first embrace and identify, yes, that baggage is there, the scars are there, the mess is there. right? But when we can identify that that's there, but we can, in humility and vulnerability, step behind our walls that we have built, the different things that we've, raised ourselves up to be better than the person next to us, when we can walk behind that and begin to just step out into our frailness, we'll rediscover the purpose and the gloriousness that God created us to be and to live in and to walk out in for our community. My wife and I have been watching this new show by Dave Ramsey. We love Dave, or not Dave Ramsey, he's the financial guy, the cook guy, Gordon Ramsay, right? We love Gordon Ramsay, a slightly different vocabulary that the two use in their shows. But Gordon Ramsay, he's got this new show, To Hell and Back in 24 Hours. And he comes into these restaurants that are, filthy and terrible and should have been shut down due to health code violations. And in 24 hours, he, flips them and makes them amazing. But in every instance of the show, it's a family, who's just kind of lost the vision for why they got into the restaurant business to begin with. And one of the last shows we were watching, in this kind of confrontational moment, Gordon asked the owner, and he says, "Have you fallen in love with your family again?" Right? Because through the stress of everything, it causes these relationships to be brought to the breaking point. And as things are beginning to be healed, more than just the restaurant, he comes in and he's healing families. And he says, have you fallen in love with your family again? And it's the same question I believe that we have to constantly be coming back to, is have we fallen in love with our Creator again? Have we fallen in love with our Maker again? Have we fallen in love with our Daddy again? Because it's so easy for us to be beaten and to be bruised and to hear the shame talking and to isolate us away from the very one who sees us as glorious. And we forget that in our state of oddity, He loves us just the way that we are, and that's enough. Have you fallen in love with your Daddy again? If you would, just go ahead and close your eyes and bow your heads with me this morning. This morning for us, as the band played this song, "Come As You Are," the invitation for us this morning is to embrace all of the oddities in our life. No, not the person sitting next to you. They may be odd too. But the invitation this morning is to look inside of us and see all of the things that, because of words spoken over us, because things done to us, we've considered as shameful or as broken or as different, and tried with all of our might to hide and to put away. And maybe there's a person we can identify as being like P.T. Barnum, who's kind of used us, and when we stepped out at some point, found ourselves rejected. The invitation this morning is for us to come as we are back to the love of our Father. Right? Because to be who God wants us to be to each other here at Forward Point, and to be who God wants us to be here in Syracuse, and then to the ends of the world, we need to first be able to embrace who it is that God created us. Short, chubby, and stubbly for me. To embrace these oddities and recognize that in God's image, created in God's image, we are glorious. And in that moment, as we come as we are and embracing, we step out from behind the stand and we begin to sing, or we begin to dance, we begin to preach, we begin to paint, we begin to do the different thing that God created you to do. And it begins to set the room ablaze. You begin to set the person next to you or across the room from you free to find the same healing and confidence that you found by coming back to your first love. So this morning, as we make a decision to come as we are first, just the way that we are, if you're here this morning and there's some kind of pain, there's some kind of past, there's some kind of hurt that has been buried deep, or that has been the source of pain and shame in your life, Jesus wants this morning you to assume that identity and to embrace who he says you are as glorious this morning. Not to be free from that, not to, to make it go away. There will be healing, but first, God wants to come to you as a leper and touch you. Sure, there may be then physical healing, there may be healing that takes place, but there is a love that you need to experience, that in that state of oddity you're in, someone could love you just the way that you are. So if you're here this morning and there's some kind of pain, some kind of hurt where you need to feel, to experience, you need Jesus to come into your life in a way that you've been missing or you've never felt before. Everyone's eyes are closed. I'm just going to ask you, just wherever you're at, just to stand to your feet here this morning. And we're going to believe that God is going to begin to just work and to move. No one's looking around, just between you, and you say, I'm going to step on the other side of the podium and I'm going to embrace who it is that, God, you made me oddities at all. And I'm going to assume my identity is glorious in you. I'm just going to ask you, just going to stand to your feet, and I just want to pray for you wherever you're at here this morning. God, you see every single person standing to their feet. Each one with a story representative of pain and of hurt, some kind of abuse, a story that is anything but the way that they wanted it to go. And God, in their state of vulnerability, as they've just, between you and them, just recognized that they need to come as they are here this morning. And they need to be loved just as they are. God, I pray that right now in this moment you would come into each person's life, that they would begin to experience and feel your presence in a way like they never have before, that your identity and who you say that they are would begin to cast out every lie that has ever been spoken over them, that has ever been received by them, that has ever been allowed to just manifest in their soul or in their life. God, that glorious one would just begin to cast out every single hurt and pain, the death that it's brought, all of it would just begin to shrivel up and die, and new life would begin to arise as they assume their new identity and being loved by you just the way that they are. God, that they would begin to feel you reach out and touch them, warts and all. God, and healing would begin to take place in their soul and in their spirits. We love you. We thank you so much. I'm going to ask everyone if you would just stand to your feet as we begin to collectively identify as an oddity, but a glorious one, and step out from behind the podium. And my prayer is for all of us here this morning is, God, that you would use us as being people who would be able to just sing or to dance or to paint or to draw, to teach, our way into bringing life and hope into other people. That wherever we are in our hobbies or in our jobs, that people would see just by the way that our lives are different, not because we can quote so many passages or know the books of the Bible in order and backwards and alphabetically, right? Not because of our words, but because we've allowed ourselves in our quiet time with you to be consumed by who you say we are. And now we just ask that you set us ablaze to burn for everyone to see. We were made for more. We are glorious. We are glorious. So God, we just collectively are going to sing this and let you do a work in our hearts as we choose to come as we are.